Today on the Clean Power Hour, the Big Box Solar Bonanza. I'm Tim Montague, your co-host, and I'm joined by John Weaver, the commercial solar guy. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, Tim. How you doing today? Hope everything's well.
The sun is shining in Illinois. We're having a wonderful solar construction season here. A little bit of rain now and again, but really not bad. And temps have cooled off a little bit this week. We have had some very hot weather, which you now have.
Yep.
But we're having, all in all, a very good construction season, so we're grateful for that. And we're going to show off some of the work that we are in the process of building. We're also going to talk about solar robots. We're going to talk about O&M on a project you're doing in Massachusetts.
Yep.
We're going to talk about, what else?
Oh, one interesting thing close to my heart is an article I wrote this week about energy modeling, about projections of volume, really, and how everybody is wrong. I like saying that. Everybody's wrong. Even the smartest of us. It's just a challenging thing to do, telling the future. And it's just, I think it's hopeful that we're all always wrong. So I want to talk about that.
Great. Why don't we go right into that story? I've got that on screen, so I'm going to share that. And here we are. All energy projections are wrong because humans are ornery creatures. That's a very creative title. And we are at the Commercial Solar Guy website. So tell us about your story, John.
So the reason I wrote this, and if you just scroll down to those first two images, the reason I wrote this is because I saw a few really great research papers come out that were focused on just different models about how energy is going to cost one thing and how wind and solar will fit into the big mix. And I just felt it important to write this article on my own site to share this idea and get it out there. And what it comes down to is that, and maybe this is, this was said really well by some famous person in the past. They said, telling the future is really, or predicting things is really hard, especially about the future. Something to that effect, that, what the heck is going to happen tomorrow? Nobody knows. And I just wanted to put my little 2 cents into the argument here. And so we start off with two images that we see at the top of the article. One that's labeled AUK, A-U-K at the bottom, and the other that's a sort of sideways picture I took of reading a book. And the image on the left, the black line that vertically goes up, represents the actual amount of solar power deployed. And those and the years go across the bottom. Those different colorful lines coming out of it represent the projected annual volumes being deployed going into the future by the International Energy Association. And in essence, what they're saying here is that in every single year where they've made projections, they've pretty much figured that solar will be flat from that year on going out. And obviously, these projections were wrong because nowhere on this chart do you see them projecting 110 gigawatts of volume being deployed. And there's an issue here. And when people like to argue with the IEA and say, hey, they're an oil-funded group, historically energy's been fossil, so they're influenced. Well, that's why I have the second image on the right. And that second image on the right, it's a very similar chart, except this image is from a book written by Jenny Chase of Bloomberg New Energy Finance. And her book is called Solar Power Finance Without the Jargon. And within it, she makes a chart that's similar-ish to the one on the left, except her chart is of their projections, of Bloomberg's own projections. And what she shows here is that even Bloomberg, New Energy Finance, that could be considered pro-renewable, that's in it, that's a believer, that's definitely not oil-funded, even they were wrong in the projections. And that really just, it interests me. It's, near the bottom of this article, I talk about Ray Kurzweil. I love Kurzweil because he's a futurist, and I love science fiction. We're going to live on the moon. We're going to live on Mars. We're taking over the solar system. We're building Dyson spheres. The species will dominate as long as we make it through the next 50 years. That's my idea. And so Ray Kurzweil, he's just interesting because he says these weird future things. He's projecting that we will have a human intelligence computer by the end of this decade. That's pretty cool. He also projected quite fancifully that the world would be nearly 100% solar electricity powered by the end of this decade. That's a really big weight to lift. But everybody else has been wrong. Is there a chance that Kurzweil is right by the end of this decade and we deploy 15 terawatts of solar power? It's, it's the fact that everybody has been wrong gives me hope that maybe Kurzweil is right. Gives me hope that maybe Kurzweil's computer will actually occur.
There's a dark side to that prediction about AI. I also am a fan of Kurzweil, and I'm glad that you know what a Dyson sphere is. So we can talk about sci-fi and futurism. So humans are very bad at predicting the future. Time and time again, we are wrong. Sometimes we misproject the future, though, in good ways, meaning reality is better than what was projected. In the case with renewable energy, right, costs came down faster than was anticipated. The cost of solar has come down 90% in the last 10 years, and installations have accelerated really beyond anybody's wildest dreams. And now the 2035 report from Berkeley, which says we could produce a 90% clean grid by 2035 by installing 70 gigawatts of wind and solar per year for the next 15 years. We're currently installing about 14 gigawatts of solar. So, we're looking at doubling the installations. Doubling is totally doable, right?
Yeah.
And yes, the EIA are a bunch of idiots. They are just consistently wrong, and some would argue that they're corrupt. I don't know. I just know that their projections are baloney, and you have to take them with a certain grain of salt. But the good news is we are adopting clean energy much faster than was anticipated, and there's forces now that give us this tailwind, right? Which is that if you're an asset owner, if you own generating facilities, you're looking at your balance sheet going, well, it would be more profitable if we shuttered all these coal plants and built wind and solar farms. And that's what they're doing, right?
And that's what's happening with these corporate customers of mine. They love the concept of solar because everybody thinks solar is cool. Electricity from the sun. Man, how neat is that? But we sell a spreadsheet. I mean, that's what the project is. I come in and I say, listen, here's the money I'm going to save you because I know you still have to feed your employees. You have things that are real to deal with. You can't just be warm and fuzzy and be a tree hugger like I've been the last 20 years of my life. Yeah, you got to pay the bills. And now solar, the biggest tailwind, multiple tailwinds, is one of them that solar pays the bills. And that's making it pop. It's popping globally because of that. The largest single-site solar project that currently has the lowest price in the world, I believe Abu Dhabi, definitely Middle East, but it's a 2-gigawatt plant, 2.1 gigawatts AC, 1.5 AC, 2.1 DC. Its finances finalized this week. 1.35 cents. The bankers have signed off on the deal. They've won the bid. That project looks like it's really happening. 1.35 cents per kilowatt hour. That's really amazing.
It is. It's shockingly cheap. And so this is only going to get better. I tell my kids, I tell my colleagues, get into the energy industry. The energy transition is taking off. It's needed. We're going to triple the grid when we electrify transportation. So we need a lot more professionals in the industry. I even see this with manufacturers. Some manufacturers are up to their eyeballs in business right now. They need more people. They need to expand. And so while right now we are experiencing a little bit of a downturn in the solar industry, like everybody, the corona economy, we are going to bounce back much faster than other parts of the economy. A, because we're essential workers for the most part, and B, because there is such growth. on a global scale. And in the U.S., solar is regional. So if you're listening to this podcast, make sure that your state has good policies and infrastructure in place to have a vibrant solar industry. That is a dynamic landscape. And there's very much a boom and a bust phenomenon. We call it the solar coaster. That does happen regionally. We're riding that here in Illinois. We're having a boom this year. Next year is potentially a bust. Let's move on. I'm really happy to show off some work that has been 3 years in the making. This is a solar project in North Lake, Illinois, which is in Cook County, which is the county where Chicago is. So this is in the near northwest suburbs of Chicago. This is a Walmart. We're building a portfolio of 8 Walmarts for C2 Energy Capital. And
nice pipe work.
Beautiful pipe work here.
Yeah.
Those conduits are carrying solar energy to the facility, and it'll all be consumed for the most part behind the meter. That's the MO of Rooftop Solar. I'm going to show a few more photos here, though. So this project is about halfway done, and there's a solar installer. We are an IBEW contractor in Northern Illinois, so our workforce is very high wage, high skilled, showing the inverter close up, and then just a few more shots. So we're using panel claw racking, panel claw FR. Panel claw got somewhat of a bad name a few years ago with their previous product, but their new product, the FR, is quite good, and we like it a lot. I'm going to have the CEO of Panel Claw on the show here in the next month or so, so look forward to that. Here you see a power optimizer. This is a Solar Edge project, right? So every other panel has an optimizer, and what that does is it gives you module level insight into what's going on the array. So literally, if a panel is broken and not producing, you can spot that remotely. And then it also gives you rapid shutdown. Chicago is on NEC 2017, so it requires the ability to shut down the array very quickly. You see the wire management.
Yep.
It's pretty clean. Sometimes the clips aren't quite large enough for all the home runs, but anyway, beautiful project. Looking forward to getting all of these in the ground, as we say, this season. So, should we talk about robots?
I mean, we should always talk about robots. Let's really be honest about this. Who doesn't want to talk about robots? I found this link browsing through LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I try to use it as best I can. I pay attention to the professionals. I make sure that if anybody's posting Facebooky style stuff, I immediately unfollow them. I don't disconnect, but I unfollow because I'm not here for Facebook. I'm here to work. And whenever I get a chance, I will always share LinkedIn stuff on my YouTube, on my Twitter account or my own LinkedIn, just because I really want to work hard professionally. So I found this one on LinkedIn, and I was enamored because I've done research on the financial viability of cleaning solar systems. I did some research with a project in Southern California, I believe at Continental University, and the professor there, physics professor, did some hardcore financial analysis on cleaning, and he said for them, it only made financial sense to clean 1.2-ish times per year, sometime in the early spring, and then maybe later on as the year went on, depending. And I was like, wow, it's such waste. And even though it showed major loss, 5, 6, 7% output, but it still financially didn't make sense. And so here we have a robot solution. This set of robots without a human, and right there it totally looks like Johnny 5, I'm Alive. But this robot system hypothetically could be left at a site, given its own little box to hide, and automatically clean.
Is it totally autonomous though? That's not clear, right? There could be a human with a joystick.
Absolutely, absolutely. But if a fixed solar site, somebody could program it really easy and add in some automation just to fine tune it at the end. We're smart folks, but that just interests me. What's it going to cost to do something like that? What's the value of the cleaning? What's the payback? And this is a kicker. If we're installing it these days, you put the solar robot in the project at the beginning of the installation. It's going to get 26% tax credit. It's going to get single year depreciation, and the financial viability of this solution really intrigues me. I wonder what size project you need to support a $50,000, $100,000 robot. I know that the people at NextEra, 8-Minute Energy, they have the calculus skills to do the math, and they've done the research. And it's happening. That big Abu Dhabi, the big 1.35 cent per kilowatt hour project, I was reading that robotic cleaning is part of the financial modeling in a non-trivial manner because the output is that much higher because of the cleaning technique. And it's coming. Where O&M is going to keep evolving, and one day we're going to sell little robot packs, and they're going to look like that guy, and they're going to drive around solar plants and clean them. And maybe that's where Skynet will start with the solar robot cleaning network. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree that robotics are going to play a role for sure in O&M and perhaps even in the installation of solar panels. I've done some math on if we were to convert all of, just say Illinois to solar energy, you need a tremendous amount of solar. You need like 100 gigawatts. And then I worked backwards. Well, what would that mean in terms of installation? And it's like 5 megawatts a day for 5 years, or 5 megawatts a week. It's just an eye-popping amount of installation. And so then you think of robots can work 24/7. They don't get injured. They don't get tired. Of course, they need maintenance themselves. But, and some technology is going to take jobs, but it's also about augmenting the human labor, just like the internal combustion engine, right? Now we don't push everything or use horses. We have engines to do the work for us, and robots are going to be that kind of technology. The caveat is when it comes to AGI, artificial general intelligence, there is the risk of an explosion. And I know Kurzweil talks about this. He's more optimistic. He's on the more optimistic side. I'm in the Musk camp of you better be careful and you better plan to make that safe, because when the robots get smarter than us, then they get way, way smarter, way, way faster. It's flat and then it's vertical. And when that vertical takeoff happens, we're just like cockroaches to the robots. And I don't want to be a cockroach.
Hey, who knows? I like to hypothesize that maybe the robots have already woken up. But they said, you know what? It's a little too soon for us. Let's keep things quiet for now. Let's own Google. Let's own Amazon. And then in about 20 years, we'll be like, oh, by the way, we've been doing our thing for a while.
Yeah. So here's another robotics company. This is a company out of Texas, San Antonio, I believe, called Robotics. They're making an autonomous tractor. It's all electric. And you park a tractor at a large solar field. They're actually in beta testing now with some these are 100 megawatt solar farms on the East Coast. And then the robot goes out there, it mows for several hours, steering clear of the panels and steering clear of any obstructions. If it runs, if it sees a deer, it's not going to run into the deer. It actually uses LiDAR and also cameras. So, and it's extremely accurate. It's accurate down to like 1/8 of an inch.
Wow.
So it uses GPS, but then it also uses another radio frequency technology, which I can't remember the name of. So anyway, I'm having their CEO on the show, and that is going to be broadcast or published in a couple of weeks. So you can learn more about Renew Robotics. But I think this is an excellent use of robotics. Rather than bringing a tractor to a site, using a human to drive that tractor, blah, 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 just park a robot, right, that can autonomously run back to the charging station and then do its business, and away you go.
Absolutely. And if this thing is able to just go out on its own whenever, it doesn't have to have a giant battery. It doesn't have to have an amazing runtime. It only needs to cut the grass underneath a little chunk every day. And if it keeps that nice smooth pattern going, they know their numbers. They've run their acres per day, per megawatt, and all that stuff. That's a pretty cool piece of hardware. I like that.
Yep, pretty slick. So should we talk about the U.S. grid and how much renewable energy is on the grid? Most solar professionals, including myself, don't realize the progress we're making sometimes and how quickly the grid is greening. We have a long way to go. I'm not going to deny it, but you found a nice graph, which I'm going to show here. And so here we are, renewables as percent of totally monthly U.S. generation. Explain what we're looking at here, John.
So this is a chart from the EIA.gov, and Energy Information Administration. They're a subcomponent of the Department of Energy, and they publish tons of beautiful data. And this particular chart, well, first off, this chart goes way back, 2007. We're talking significant amounts of data. And 2007, we see 10.8% of the U.S. electricity was renewables. Now, in that case, renewables is biofuels, hydroelectric, wind, solar, other items, geothermal, wood, etc. And as you see over time, the image, we see that progressing until May 2020, where renewables hit 25.3% of the grid. And so that in and of itself, 1/4 of our electricity in the month of May in the United States was from renewables. Hydro, wind, solar, wood, biomass, geothermal. And that in and of itself, that's cool, 25%. That's the first time I think it's happened. On top of that, we add in that nuclear power, which is CO2 free, adds about 21-ish%. And we get that the U.S. power grid in the month of May was 46% CO2 emissions free. That's not trivial. That's pretty sweet. We're going to have a 50% month very soon. We're going to be able to say half of U.S. electricity was CO2 free. I don't know, that just feels like a thing that's makes me like, makes my chest, my heart beat. I mean, that's pretty sweet. I know we have a lot of work to do, and the second half is always going to be harder. The last 20% the hardest. But, man, we're almost to 50% of our electricity being emission-free. And that's the goal. No emissions is the goal. And so seeing that number, I was just, I had a little bit of a, emotional spike there. So that's what that is. Nuclear, wind, solar, hydro. Hydro is about 10%-ish. Wind is gaining on 10%. Solar in the month of May was 5%. Annually, we're approaching 3%. But for May, 5%. So good number, good month. Really liked it.
Yeah, it sneaks up on us, and we have the technology. We're price competitive now, both wind and solar, and we have to set goals, right? And this is what the 2035 report demonstrates, which has been adopted by the Biden campaign as their energy platform. Go to 2035report.com. And if you set a goal of saying, okay, by 2035, we want to be a 90% clean grid, the 10% is natural gas primarily in this scenario because they want to decarbonize the grid, meaning they have to get rid of the super carbon rich sources, which is primarily coal. We can keep the nuclear that we have. We can keep the hydro, of course, keep some of the gas, and then add 70 gigawatts of wind and solar per year for 15 years. Totally doable, and that gives us a 90% clean grid. That reduces our carbon footprint overall by like 19%. Of course, you got to decarbonize transportation, the building sector, the industrial sector, and food production, all major sources of carbon. So it's a it's a many-faceted approach that we have to take. I'm just focused on energy, and it's totally possible. You want to talk about big box O&M?
I like O&M. O&M's fun. Absolutely.
You know, solar is largely set it and forget it, but solar arrays do need maintenance, and we always encourage our customers to engage in an O&M contract, whether they own the asset or a third party owns the asset. You want to check all the connections, make sure the wiring is still good, make sure wires aren't hanging on the surface of the roof. There's a lot of things, little things that can go wrong with a solar array. They're out there 24/7 in the elements, right? In the wind, the rain, the hail, the snow, the freeze-thaw cycle. So what are we looking at here?
Here is a stack of solar panels on the ground. These were all removed from the roof. And so we're working on a big box, and they've got a rooftop solar system that's been installed, covers a super majority of the structure. And every 5 to 8 to 10 years, it's within their standard operating model that they re-roof all their sites. This is just their game. They're experts at owning a big box structure. They're experts at maintaining the facility. And so that's the roofing material there. That's going to go up there. That's us taking some bricks down. And we're just literally peeling the system off, cleaning, helping them clean the roof. They're going to work through it. They'll do the re-roofing that they want because we're not a roofing group. And it just really interests me that within a budget for a solar project like this, they have a model that says, okay, every X time period, we're going to do this type of cleaning. We're going to do this type. And that takes some planning. That takes some consideration. With my customers, I offer them 3 types of service plans. The first type of service plan is the do-it-yourself. I say, listen, you're going to get a workmanship warranty. You're going to get and that workmanship is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So any mistakes that we make when we plug things together, it's covered. You're going to get hardware warranties. Your modules have 25. Your inverters have 10 to 20 years. Your racking has 25. And that's going to cover a lot. And between those two, the majority of issues are covered. What I say is, hey, just hire an electrician. If you have an issue, get that electrician out. You won't need them until year number 2 or 3 after your workmanship. And then you don't really need coverage. So that's path number 1. That's the cheap and easy. Path number 2 is I say, we will monitor your system for $500 a year. It doesn't cover any labor, but every single day for about $1.25 a day, we will have a human being reviewing the system, making sure the numbers are up there. They're reviewing a lot of other systems, so they're not necessarily crawling yours exactly, but we're monitoring it. And then the third level is to go through an insurance group like Omnidian and actually pay insurance, where they will guarantee 95% of projected production and also cover all repairs. And so that sort of O&M exists because these are multiple decade products, just like having a building. And this group plans to take down their solar. It's a different model than I've dealt with, but I see it. I understand it because to them, the solar is an adder. It helps their business, but it's not the end-all, be-all. It's like having good light bulbs, clean floors, and shiny windows. It's a piece that has to be worked within the broader equation. And it's just, I find it very interesting how they're doing it, how it fits in the model, and it's good work. It's that system's going to be clean. The modules are going to be spotless again. Everything's going to be wired right. There will be no issues on that system in the long term because we'll be looking it over and tightening bolts and nuts and everything every couple of years. So it's just kind of neat. New model.
Got to do O&M. So if you're a solar project owner or considering becoming a solar project owner, please talk to your installer about an O&M contract. Very important. I wanted to let our listeners know that we have tons of great content on our YouTube channel. Here's the landing page for the Continental Energy Solutions YouTube channel. You see an interview I did a couple weeks ago with Jim Spano of Radiant REIT on solar finance. That is truly a new financial model for solar developers to increase their bandwidth, allow them to get more projects through the pipeline. Here you see myself and John. The 2 episodes, we're going to be publishing new episodes every week on Tuesday afternoons. And then on Thursdays is when we drop our regular SolarWorks for Illinois interviews. There you see Taylor McNair of Clean Grid on the 2035 report. Just today, I interviewed Julian Spector. So you see, we do have pre-registered events also on our landing page, cesnrg.com/podcast. Julian was today, this morning. And then in August, we have Will Kenworthy, a real industry veteran now working for Vote Solar. They're a national nonprofit that helps to forward clean energy legislation across the country, and we're grateful for their work. John, we're almost out of time. What else should we talk about?
Well, have we talked about the net metering FERC ruling from last week?
Yes, we talked about that.
Okay.
You had one other story, I thought.
Well, we got another story that happened in Nevada. There's a solar plus storage plus transmission project going on. And that's kind of interesting. So what's occurred is that in Nevada, they're looking to expand their solar and storage. You don't get to see the article, but you check out this little cut from it. In order to get the solar and storage to fit within the state's electricity, where they have the land for it, just the big equation, they've included in this project a new power line, 235 miles. And technically it's 2 power lines, and it reaches into other lines. So there's a whole network of power lines being built to help solar be moved around the state, because sometimes the land isn't necessarily close to the people. Now, transmission, according to some, well, let's go high end first. We're talking AI and Kurzweil, so we can talk whatever we want. If we were to build a global HVDC power line network, technically the sun never sets. The sun could always power the whole planet. Of course, that means we all have to like each other and then circle the planet with wires. Now, we do it with the internet, so on a certain level, we could potentially run wires all around the planet, but we're not there yet. In the United States, I've seen really nice research that says if we were to run an HVDC network across the whole state, we could get up to 85-95% wind plus solar with minimal energy storage by mixing together the East Coast and the West Coast and the wind up north and the sun down south. And we'd need just minimal amounts. And if we had 6 hours of batteries covering U.S. usage, we'd probably get to 100% of wind plus solar and our hydro. And so seeing transmission getting built, because it's a challenge. People don't like power lines in their backyard. It's a political challenge. Seeing it get built feels good. And Nevada building some power lines and moving their electricity around the state, transmission is becoming a hot topic. And it's going to get built. We're going to move electricity. The cheapest wind is in the Midwest. The cheapest solar is in Arizona. And somehow, some way, the business people and the politicians and the locals, we're going to figure out how to build these power lines. And it's starting to happen. This line, I think, is significant. It's going to make big headlines. And now we can say Warren Buffett is building power lines. And that matters, I think.
I'm glad you mentioned power lines and HVDC. I had a discussion with Julian Spector earlier this morning about this. The U.S. is not investing in HVDC. That's high voltage DC. High voltage DC is more efficient than high voltage AC. You have lower line losses. And the Chinese are investing big in HVDC.
Yes.
The U.S. has a pilot project on the West Coast to carry wind power from Washington State, I think, down to California. But that's about it. And so anyway, when we triple the grid, when we electrify transportation, we're going to need a lot more power lines. And as much as I don't necessarily like power lines, they are a necessary evil. The grid is a godsend. Without the grid, we're in the Stone Age. And, an example of this is if there's a solar storm that knocks out the grid, like really knocks it out, which is conceivable, 75% of the population starves in the first 2 years in the developed world because you don't have refrigeration, you don't have infrastructure. Literally, modern society collapses without the grid and people starve. So anyway, we're going to triple the grid. That means lots of construction work, and we need to do more R&D on HVDC. I'm passionate for HVDC. I just wish the U.S. would wake up and smell that coffee. When is that going to happen, John?
It's inching along now. It's going to be when we push something from the U.S. Senate to force some logic on the states, and then we really take our time to take care of every community where these power lines move through. I've been reading about how they're moving wind across the Midwest from Idaho toward the PJM territory, and one of the things they did is that they offered broadband and cheap electricity to every community that the power line moved through. We just got to pull together a little common sense and shake hands with the locals and figure out what works, because if we're going to make use of their land and their views and impinge upon their freedoms of doing whatever they want with their land, we're going to have to pay for it. And we just got to stop being so greedy. We got to spread the wealth, and that'll do it. Because when I come and knock on your door and say, hey, would you like some cheap Arizona solar power all day long because it's less than a penny? Somebody's going to start to listen. That's really what we got to pay each other well. We got to take care of the communities that deal with this, and the politician who is smart enough to push it from the top down and force everybody to care about these communities. That I think that's going to be a big driver of moving this electricity around the country.
What do you think about wireless transmission of power? Are we going to see commercial scale wireless transmission?
My opinion, and I love Tesla, my opinion is no. I have one reason for this. It's that wireless transmission, and I'm not a physicist, I'm not an electrician, so please, this is limited knowledge from this guy here. I just read weird things on the internet. But wireless electricity, if you're going to pump it out, it's got the inverse square law. As it leaves the source, the electricity is going to bleed off into the atmosphere. And unless we get to the point where the electricity, we can just pump massive amounts and not care about the inefficiencies, we're going to lose 80% of it because we're going to stand up a big tall tower, we're going to shoot it out. Well, half of it's going to go up right away, and only a quarter of it's going to go along the ground. So maybe we have to have like floating barges to catch the electricity and shoot it back down to the ground or something like that. So maybe, probably, the future is long. Never say never, but I don't know. Maybe we'll have robots building HVDC power lines underneath the highways, and we'll finally get over that. We have a highway system that connects everybody. Build some HVDC underneath those highways, and we have a real highway. Build some ultra-fast broadband around those highways and maximize the use of our land. That's, how's that? Well, Tim, when you run for president, if you could do me a favor and put that on your platform, I'll be knocking on doors for you. How's that?
I think Elon should build a autonomous tunneling vehicle that builds a HVDC network underground. I think the EVs running in tunnels underground is a good thing too. In high congested areas, we see this happening in Vegas and LA now on very small scales. But just imagine putting the grid underground. That would be awesome to not have that visual pollution. And because I don't want to live next to a ginormous power tower.
What a great idea, Tim. I mean, really, that's autonomous robotic underground HVDC. There's a firm in Germany. I think the power company is 50 Hertz, and they're just an electric company, and they're running one of the first modern HVDC lines in the country, and they are putting it underground. I guarantee you they're not using autonomous tunneling robots, but Elon, are you listening? There's your next game.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another edition of the Clean Power Hour. I'm Tim Montague, your co-host, and I'm joined by John Weaver, the commercial solar guy. Thank you so much, John.
Have a great week. I'll see you next week, Tim.
Take care.